get started on week number 3 of RAINmaker. Welcome to the ones who are just joining us for the first time. We appreciate you being here. We do have recordings available for every time that you miss. And we are working on being able to transmit this to our Facebook group so you guys have a recording immediately available instead of, waiting for the process to edit and all of that. So we do appreciate Darren's work doing that, but this is also going to help you guys have access to that information faster. I am going to start sharing my screen over here so that we can begin. So, all right, so this is just a reminder that we are recording this main session. We do not record the breakout sessions. That is your private safe space. Please remain muted. And if you have any questions, raise your hand or write them on the chat because we are monitoring that. And we will try to answer all of them. We want to recognize and appreciate that this program is funded by the EDA. And a lot of our other programs are funded by cities, counties, federal agencies, and nonprofit organizations around Oregon and the country. Today, I want you guys to just focus on this presentation. And so we have decided, not today only, but for the rest of the program, you do not need to worry about your cohort number. We're taking care of that. The only thing I would like you to do is to rename yourself with your first name, your last name, and your business. The way that you do this is that you go to the bottom of your Zoom window, and then you click on participants, and then you're going to receive this list. This is going to be more populated today. And then you just click on more, and you can rename yourself. Then this is going to show up, and this is how you do it. And then you just click on rename, and that's it. And then everybody, you guys are going to be automatically assigned to your cohorts. So that way we have smaller breakout sessions. Please join our private group. We started the program and we had previous participants from RAINmaker, around 89, I think it was. I did decide to change the image today because I think it's very nice that you guys have been joining and that we are creating a stronger community where we can all learn from each other and connect. So today we are going to be talking about how to increase your business visibility on a $0 budget. This is about publicity, about being featured on different medias. And I will talk to you a little bit more about our guest speakers in a second. I wanted to let you know that we had a change in our program. Caroline was going to teach about projecting your sales and seeing your market size and all of those things, but she's not going to be able to make it for next week. She is going to offer it as a separate session. It is optional for you guys to go. This doesn't affect your attendance or anything like that. But I do advise you to go to it because if you don't know your market size, if you don't know how your sales could be, then how do you know that your business is possible in that market? So this is something that's very important for you to be able to really make strategic efforts and just have a little bit of a dose of reality. It's a good thing. And she really presents it in a very easy format. So we are going to have a different topic, and that is going to be Kickstart Your Online Presence. And Tori Cox and Lily Salazar are going to be teaching that. So now this is the agenda for today. Let's see, we are right on time. I wanted to bring in Jocelyn Wing. She's going to be hosting a mentor hour this afternoon. Jocelyn, if you can please take a few seconds to introduce yourself to everybody. Jocelyn going once, going twice.
Hi, I'm sorry I was muted. My name is Jocelyn Wing with Optimized Media Marketing. I've been helping local businesses with their website and local visibility since 2010, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to, uh, help with anything that I can. So we'll see you later up this afternoon.
Thank you, Jocelyn. So there have been a little bit of confusion about the mentor hours. We have mentor hours that are for the speakers, and this is essentially to go deeper into the subject or the topic that they are touching on and to answer your questions, but also for you to start applying what you are learning and then getting some feedback from them. The mentor hours that are led by our cohort mentors are more general. So, it's like it's about the topics that we've been seeing. It's about how you are applying that. If you can, just to have reassurance that you're on the right track. Because we know how sometimes you're on your own doing it, and then you're like, I don't even know if this is right or not. So we're essentially a sounding board for that. So yeah, that is that. And Jocelyn is going to host one um, today at 3 in the afternoon, but we are going to have each of you in your own cohorts coordinate with your mentors, and on the second half of the program have them closer to you, so you guys are getting closer to doing your marketing framework and all of that. And it's just going to be a really good time for you to ask questions to digital marketing experts. Now, oh, I forgot that I made that. We are so happy to have Ellen Yin here with us. She is the founder of Cubicle to CEO. Ellen began, she was an agency person on marketing, and she went and left her job. She started with one-on-one clients slowly, and she has grown her business to 7 figures in about 3 years. And she actually has a very untraditional way of working out. She actually shares her income reports, and it's very open about her process. She has so much knowledge. She has been featured in all of these different channels. And so right now she's going to share how to do that. We're going to do a format where we ask her questions, and then she gives us an answer. We have some preset questions, let's say, that we are going to start just to get your brains going, and then you guys can start asking your own questions. If you think about something as she's talking, just write it on the chat, and we will take note of that, and that way we get everything answered. So let's just hold on. Ellen, welcome.
Thank you so much, Ani, for having me. I'm so thrilled to be back. Wonderful to meet all of you.
All right. So the first question. Why is publicity one of the best forms of marketing for small businesses and startups?
So I think this is a great question to kick off, because if you are going to invest your time and energy into something as a small business owner or as an entrepreneur, you want to make sure it has a great return for your time, right? So there's actually 5 reasons why I think publicity is one of the best forms of free marketing. And I'll start with that first one, which is that it is completely free if you learn this skill set and you learn how to pitch yourself. Now, of course, if you work with a publicity firm or you hire a publicist, then there are fees involved. But if you learn this skill set, it is truly a lifelong skill that will pay dividends in your business, no matter where you go in your career. So first things first, it is free if you learn the skill. Second reason I think publicity is amazing is because it is time leveraged, meaning that when you show up for an interview, let's say on someone's podcast, or you get, let's say, a mention in an article online, you are present for that moment in time when that content is being created, but then it lives forever and ever as evergreen content. And this is so powerful because We all know that our most limited resource as business owners typically is our time. And so we want to make sure that our efforts matter and have impact, not just in the moment that we're doing them, but forevermore. And just to give you a tangible example of this, one of my very first media opportunities I ever had was back in 2017. I recorded a podcast, and at the time, this show was fairly new, so it wasn't even necessarily a show that got a lot of traction, but it was a great opportunity for me to be a podcast guest and to get practice being interviewed. And that one episode that was published now 5 years ago, I still to this day sometimes get messages and emails being like, hey, I discovered you, or I came across your website, or I started learning from one of your programs and became a customer because I heard you on this person's podcast. And that podcast has since grown into one of the largest marketing and business podcasts. It gets anywhere from 50 to 100,000 downloads a month. And so as you can see, that effect can really amplify over time. So it's free, it's time leveraged. Number 3, this is probably one of my favorite reasons that I love publicity and media, is that it allows you to fast track your visibility as a startup, as a new business, and as an entrepreneur. So publicity is a form of what I call borrowed traffic, meaning that it allows you to get in front of other people's audiences, other platforms, established audiences that they have spent years of time and lots of money growing those channels and those audiences. You get to essentially, I'll use an analogy, you get to essentially park your lemonade stand in front of a stadium of people or on a busy street corner where all of these people have already been gathered for you, your ideal customers, rather than having to only rely on your personal network or your personal audience. And if you talk to any marketing professional, they will always tell you, right, you need to grow your audience, whether it's on social, whether it's your own database, like your email list. And while I think that growing your audience is an excellent and important strategy for your business, one thing that many marketing professionals fail to remind you is that it is a long-term strategy, right? Audience building is a long-term strategy. It takes time. That's a key factor. And so, I mean, some people, of course, may go viral overnight, but that is so rare, few and far between. I really don't think that's the goal that most people should shoot for if they want sustainability in their business. And so while you are working on building your own audience, do we want to just wait months and years and have zero sales while we're waiting to build a community to sell to? Absolutely not, right? So media is one of the best ways that you can get traffic, new eyeballs, new visibility to your business all the time while you're growing your own smaller audience by getting in front of other people's bigger audiences. Does that track with everybody? Okay, so 4th reason is media builds your credibility and your authority. We can talk all day about how great we think our services and our products are. And while there may be truth in that, maybe you even have facts to back up your claims. The truth is that when other people vouch for us, especially other people who, and when I say people, that could be an individual, but it could also be a platform, a business, a well-recognized household brand name. When someone else that is a more established business vouches for you, it just instantly boosts your credibility, right? It's saying, okay, like if let's say you say, oh, I am the #1 marketing expert, but if Forbes says you're the #1 marketing expert, people are a lot more likely to buy into that, right? Because they already trust and consume that brand. So it's attaching their credibility to yours. So I think that's a huge piece. And a really easy analogy to think about is like, let's say you have 2 identical products or 2 identical services, but you go to one website and it's just, them talking about like, hey, we're so great, you should really work with us. And then you go to this other website, same exact service, same exact price, literally every single thing is the same, except for it says like this product was featured on, Oprah's Favorite Things, or it's been featured on NBC and all of these huge platforms. Which one do you think people are more likely to pay for, right? If everything else is identical, 9 times out of 10, if they don't already know you, they're probably going with the one that has more established credibility. So that's another important thing to think about. And then the fifth and last reason I love publicity and think it's worth your time to learn is it actually increases your own website searchability in Google. So every single time you get a media win, a media feature, no matter if it's on a small platform or a huge national platform, if you can get a backlink, meaning like when they quote you or when they source you, they link your name back to your website, you are building your search engine optimization so that when people search for keywords related to your brand or search your brand name, your business name, you are going to show up higher on Google's search rankings, which is only going to therefore, again, build that momentum and bring more people to your website.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So somebody asked over here, you mentioned that if you develop the skill sets, can you clarify a little bit more what those skill sets look like?
Yeah, it's the skill of learning how to pitch yourself, how to talk about what you do or what you sell or what you have to offer to the media and make them care about why they should lend their platform to sharing your voice, your story, your products, your services. So you can hire a publicist to do this for you, right? But most good publicists charge retainers of anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000 a month. And usually they require one-year contracts or more upfront. So that's like a six-figure investment you're putting into your business. Now, is it worth it? Perhaps, but if you don't have those funds upfront, right, learning how to do that yourself, learning how to pitch yourself to the media is going to be massively helpful to your business long-term. And also, if you learn how to pitch yourself well, I think it applies to mediums outside of just media. It allows you to show up better for potential strategic partnerships, for collaborations with your peers, for pitching your own products to your potential customers. There's so many different ways that learning the skill of pitching is going to really help you in your business.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now the next question, what types of media channels can you get featured on?
So there's so many different types of media channels, which is why we're so lucky to live in the digital information age, right? I think for a long time, there was, decades ago, there was a lot of gatekeeping around media because there were only really what we now call like top tier traditional media platforms like TV, radio, magazines, and large newspapers. So it was much harder for, the average person to get into those platforms. These days, there are not only so many more ways that you can get featured in the media, such as new digital channels, podcasts, right, are huge and ever growing. Millions and millions of more people are downloading and listening to podcasts every single month. Websites are another great one. Websites can get millions of impressions every single month. Blogs, same thing. And even now, as you know, social media platforms, if you are able to catch the attention of a thought leader, of an influencer, and they bring you onto their virtual stage, that can make a huge impact in your business as well. So in addition to there being all of these different types of channels, another thing that's amazing about the current time that we live in is our access to meet people in the media, to journalists, to podcast hosts, to magazine editors, whatever it may look like, is so democratized, right? Through social media, you have direct contact and direct access to so many of these people to land right in their inbox and have that one-to-one access without a gatekeeper or without having to send off a letter to their New York post office address that you don't know if it will ever even get read. There's so many different ways for you to actually reach those people as well.
So I'm going to plug in a few questions while they're asking. Is the netting product or services for fundraising considered publicity? It's not necessarily free, but you are putting your product out there and they're piggybacking. Piggybacking on someone else's event and meeting new prospective clients.
So Lauren, I like the way you think. Donating products is absolutely a form of borrowed traffic. So that concept that I'm talking about, like getting in front of other people's established audiences. And that's a really great strategy. However, I don't necessarily consider it the same as like media publicity. I mean, unless that event is being widely covered, like if, let's say, the local newspaper is showing up to cover that event, or maybe a press release was put out somewhere about this event and your company was mentioned, that's the media type of publicity I'm talking about more. The strategy you're referring to is still great, but that would, like, even if you're looking at like from the terms of, let's say, an accountant or a bookkeeper, right? When you are donating product for an event and it has your advertising on it, typically that's going towards, that's like an advertising expense, right? As far as a write-off. So advertising and publicity do have synergy, but I think that they are different things, because true publicity is free. Like, people are not charging you to write about you, to feature you, etc.
Awesome. Very good that we touch on that distinction. Now, how do you leverage media opportunities to increase your website traffic and brand trust?
Absolutely. So I already touched a little bit about the brand trust piece, right? And how media can increase your perceived credibility and your authority and your space. But as far as increasing traffic to your website, so this will depend on what media platform you have a feature on. So for example, even though most people view TV as kind of like the holy grail, because, you know, there's just something about being like, hey, tune in today and see me on, you know, the Today Show or something, that just feels like a big deal. And millions of people are watching those channels. But what you shouldn't discount is that even though a national publication like that can seem a lot flashier and seem to reach a lot more people, we do have to realize that most of TV today are, you know, it's consumed in like 30-second sound bites and huge headlines, right? So unless someone is literally sitting down, like, I don't know if any of you watch, for example, like the Kelly Clarkson show, right? Like if you have like a personality that you really love, or someone's like sitting down to watch SNL, that's different because they're there as like as a fan, like an engaged fan. But people who are just flipping through, like, you know, MSNBC, Fox News, whatever, it's probably just on in the background. Even if millions of impressions are being counted for those shows, not everyone's actually your target audience, and not everyone's paying attention, and not everyone is going to remember. However, some of the smaller platforms like podcasting, for example, some of the newer platforms like podcasting, even though, like, let's say you get on a show where that show only has 100 listeners, that's microscopic, right? Compared to the general reach of a huge channel like ABC. But those 100 people are, if you're going on the right podcast, right, the right niche podcast, those are literally your perfect client or customer or potential strategic partner, someone that you want that person's attention and you want them to know that you exist. And they're spending an hour, literally an hour, with your voice in their ear, right? Imagine the type of relationship that's formed in that kind of capacity versus someone just catching a glance of your face flashing across the screen for 10 seconds on national television. So don't discount those smaller channels. And in those specific types of formats, you always want to lead people back to your website. So whatever you are talking about, whether it is in an article or whether it is in a podcast or on TV or whatnot, whatever that topic is, if they give you an opportunity to share a resource or to connect with you further after the fact, make sure that you have a very incentivizing resource or like carrot to dangle that is directly related to what you showed up to talk about that day, that propels people to want to go search you out and get that next action step, right? So I'm just going to use all of us as an example right here, right now, today. You all showed up here to learn about publicity in this free training, right? Later in the breakout session, I'm going to actually walk you step by step through what I call my perfect podcast pitch, because this pitch works amazing to get your emails actually read and responded to if you're pitching for podcasts. But normally, I mean, you're getting that for free, but normally, if this was, you know, another training that's something that I probably wouldn't have given for free. And what I would do instead is, like, let's say if this were a podcast interview and Ani was interviewing me, at the end of this interview, I would say, hey, if you really enjoy this training today and you want to actually grab my plug and play template for creating your own winning podcast pitch to get yourself your first feature, you can go to my website here, plug in your name and email, and it's yours, right? That's like a very incentivizing call to action. And it makes sense as the progressive next step that someone would take based on what we talked about today. So now you're driving a bunch of new eyeballs to your website and you're collecting their information. So you're growing your own database of emails, which allows you to remarket back to those people with your products and services. So that would be my number one tip in terms of using media to increase your website visibility, but also to increase your own leads. The other quick little tip I'll share here is that if you are being featured, just really anywhere, it doesn't matter. Whatever your most recent feature is, go ahead and just plug that into your email signature, like as a one-liner. So like your name, maybe some of you have your profile picture in your email signature, just at the very bottom, just do a, hey, PS, did you see me recently in whatever the outlet name is, and just hyperlink it. You'll be surprised how many people actually pay attention to email signatures and will click over to that. And then from there, be directed back to your website again, because if you're giving that clear call to action at the end, that's going to keep people coming back to you.
Awesome. All right. Another question. So how do you find the right people to pitch for media features?
This is a great question. And this can really make or break whether your pitch ever even gets seen or read. Number one thing is to not go directly to like the editor-in-chief or, the president, the CEO of a media company. That is typically not the right person to pitch. You also probably don't want to be pitching their advertising department. That's a reason why I wanted to distinguish between advertising and publicity, because if you pitch the advertising department of a magazine, let's say, or a newspaper, who you're getting in front of is not the journalist. You're getting in front of their sales guy, right? The sales rep, and that they're going to be trying to sell you ad space or branded content, not necessarily a free feature. So depending on the outlet, like let's start with more traditional, magazines or newspapers, which typically all magazines and newspapers these days, if they're in print edition, they also exist online, right? So what I want you to do is and maybe even if you just want to start small, you can go to, let's say, like your local newspaper, go to the category that your business would fall under. So whether that's business, sports, lifestyle news, arts and entertainment, whatever that would be. So like if you're a restaurant, right, you're probably looking in arts and entertainment, reporters that are reporting on local foods and events and things that the community want to show up for. You want to go into the section that you are wanting to be featured in, and then you want to start looking at the recent stories that are being published, stories that are similar to this type of stories you could see yourself appearing in, and look at who's actually writing those stories. So you want to go directly to the source, to the journalist, and familiarize yourself with their work. Because the thing is, if someone has recently reported on something, you do not want to duplicate and repitch them almost an identical story, right? Because they're going to, A, probably not respond, and B, even if they do, it will just be to politely tell you, I actually just reported on a story like this, so unfortunately, this isn't a good fit. So definitely look up those journalists. And then most journalists for more traditional media sites, so again, newspapers, magazines, TV, they're very, very active on Twitter. So what I always do is if I pitch a direct journalist via email, I will follow up by connecting on Twitter and say, hey, I just shot you an email about, with a really great or a really relevant, a very timely story idea, right? It was sent from, and I'll say like what my email was with the subject line, blah, blah, blah. Just want to make sure it landed in your inbox. If you need me to resend it, I can. So it's kind of like a tag team. Like you email them and then you follow up with them somewhere else where they're already active and most likely to actually see your message, since their inbox probably gets flooded with pitches all the time. So that's an easy way to start. Another tip that you can try is you can actually reverse engineer who to reach out to by thinking of a leading competitor in your space, or a leading like a thought leader influencer in your space who gets a lot of press coverage, right? Look up that person. And if you go to Google, like literally, can someone give me an example? Just shout out like a competitor or a thought leader in your space. I work better with like real examples. Does anyone want to put something in the chat? Okay, Tinder. Yes. Heather, perfect. Let's say you are creating a new app, right? You're trying to compete with Bumble and Tinder. And so what you would do is you would go to Google and you would search Tinder or any of their executives that are likely to, like the CEO of Tinder, the VP of marketing of Tinder, whoever would be newsworthy and notable, right? Search them and then go over to the tab in Google that says news and filter by most recent news in the last, let's say 6 months. Grab all of those links everywhere they've appeared in the last 6 months, and then go back to each of those articles and find who the journalist was for all of those articles. So you can go straight to the source of someone who you know is actively reporting on your space and your topic and talking about your competitor. Go give them a compelling reason why they should be talking about you instead. So that's another really easy way to do that, is to reverse engineer. The third thing I will say is for podcasts in specific, and I say this as a podcast host, you need to double check if you are pitching a podcast, whether or not the podcast is solely managed by the actual host or whether they have a team supporting them. So for example, every single week, like we get so many pitches to be on our show and they always go to me. They always just email my general email. I don't read any of those pitches. And so every time someone emails me, I'm like, oh, sorry. Like this is not the best place. And sometimes I try to redirect them and you'd be surprised how many people don't even read their responses and they'll just reply right back to me. And I'm like, no, I just told you, like, I don't book the guests on our show. So I have a podcast manager that does that whole thing is her space. And I give her, full autonomy to do that. So when you're looking up a podcast, the best thing to do is to DM the host perhaps, or DM the company name and ask them specifically, who is the best person for me to reach out to about your podcast? Could you give me their email, please? Make sure you ask for the right contact so that you're not wasting their time or your time.
Wonderful. Actually, somebody just asked, how did you find that person?
You can start with a general email. So like if you have done your digging and you literally can't, like, for example, on my website, we do actually list, like, if you're reaching out about a podcast inquiry, please email here. But if you can't find that, you can email the general info email or whatever contact email they have, and just let them know, like, hey, I'm trying to reach the person in charge of your podcast, who would be the best contact for that. And then just simply ask that.
Awesome. So I am going to start opening up for questions. I have been writing a few over here, and you guys can drive me crazy with the chat and just fill it up with all of the questions that you have. So one of those here, how and when to ask for those backlinks? Like if you get featured somewhere, how do you ask them to actually link your website to it? If they, how do you do that process?
Yeah, typically most journalists, it's like a common practice that they would ask. If they plan to credit you as a source, like if they're quoting you in an article, they'll typically double check, like, is this how your name is spelled? How do you want to be referred to? And they'll usually ask for a link. If they don't, you can always double check and say, hey, when you credit me as a source, can you please use this as my link for my name? And don't be afraid to make that ask. The worst thing they can say is no, but that is very rare. Typically, they are going to want to backlink to you. There are only certain outlets that don't let you do that. Like, for example, my friend, he writes for Entrepreneur, right? Entrepreneur.com, Entrepreneur Magazine. Their editors are very particular about the way that people are credited in their articles. So you can't always get a backlink there, but it never hurts to at least ask. So don't be afraid to make the ask.
All right, there you go, guys. All right, so what is your opinion on using Clubhouse to promote you as an expert in your field and promoting your unique skills and business services?
Clubhouse, I think, is a really awesome app. If you feel like that is where you shine. So you'll hear me say this a lot, but I really believe context is everything when it comes to marketing. Too many people try to hop on the hottest trends just because everybody is doing it. If you don't have a strategy behind why you're doing something and you don't understand, what the purpose of you being on that platform is and how that content is leading back to your own, databases or your own products and services, then I don't think it's worth your time. It's better to do one thing really well than a lot of things mediocre, right? So if you shine in audio platforms, if you are a really great speaker, if you love showing up in that way, awesome. Clubhouse might be for you. If you cringe at the sound of your own voice and you hate talking to people, then maybe that's not your strength, and don't force yourself to be on Clubhouse just because other people are. So that's my general take on that.
Wonderful. All right. Are more introvert-friendly interviews and publicity, essentially written, significantly less effective than live or in-person interviews?
No, not at all. I know someone, some of you may have seen her face before, but Susie Moore is one of my favorite people in the publicity media space. She has literally built like an incredibly successful business with a giant email list, all by guest blogging for large outlets. That's all she does. And every single outlet that she's guest blogging to has, hundreds of thousands of readers on their site each month. She gets to backlink to her website with an opt-in in every single one of those articles. She has built like hundreds of thousands of subscribers. She's gotten all of that free publicity. So definitely not. Do not discount any media channel just because it is, maybe less flashy. It's not about flashy. It's about reaching the right person with a clear message.
Excellent. Let's see. So if you're giving a presentation at some point, or you have a specific thing you're doing, a speaking or etc., should you contact your local paper to see if they want to write about you?
Yeah. Okay. So there's actually something I wanted to talk about that wasn't in our fireside chat. Ani, do you mind if I take a moment to talk about this? Because I think this is extremely important. If you are pitching an outlet, there are two essential elements that you must keep in mind when you pitch. Doesn't matter what type of channel it is, okay? The two essential elements is that your pitch must always, always, always be timely, meaning it must have relevance to current trends or news that is happening in the world, even if your company is not news related. And I will give you a specific example of how I pitch something like this in just a moment. But timeliness is key. So you must research like what is actually happening in the news right now, what is relevant in this current time and moment, because even though content and media features are evergreen, meaning they are paying off and bringing you new visibility for months and years to come, in the moment that you pitch it, journalists don't care. The media doesn't care unless they feel like it has relevance to this moment in time. So that's number one. Number two is that your pitch should be story-based, not topic-based. So an example of this is like, okay, let's say, for example, that you are a wellness expert, okay? Or maybe you own like a therapy practice, right? Something that is topic related would be like mental health. Like, I'm an expert on mental health. I'd like to talk about mental health in your media outlet, right? That's topic based. That's not a very compelling pitch because there's 100 million people that could talk about well, maybe not 100 million, but there's a lot of people out there that could talk about that topic, right? And the journalist doesn't really know what to do with that. So you have to give them a story that's tied to that topic. So a story spin could be something like, let's say your target audience is business owners, like you like to work with entrepreneurs who struggle with mental health. It could be 5 ways entrepreneurs can practice self-care in 10 minutes a day, right? Like that's a specific story that is something that a journalist could work with and go, oh, that has relevance to what is happening right now. Okay. So you always want to make sure relevance and that there's a specific story attached to your pitch. And the stronger your point of view is, the better, meaning that this media is a place where people want an interesting take on a commonplace subject. They want to know, what is your unique perspective on this and why does your voice matter for this platform? And the stronger of an emotion that your pitch evokes, or if it's going to create discussion, maybe even debate, whatever that looks like, that is actually really interesting to news, because when you're pitching the media, you have to think about, what is the priority of media outlets? How do they get paid as a business? They get paid by impressions right? Because advertisers will pay more the more eyeballs their content attracts. So you have to think about, what is a story that I could pitch that would make it a no-brainer for them to work with me and to publish this, because we know it's going to create conversation and attract a lot of attention to this. So that's my little quick 2 cents. My specific example that I will give on this is about how to tie in your business to something that's timely and relevant. So at the beginning of the pandemic in 2020, I was reading, I think it was the Oregonian, and they had a news article about job layoffs in Oregon. And it was like, I think in 1 month, the state lost like 25,000 jobs. It's a lot of jobs, right? And I remember reading that, and it really like resonated with me because or impacted me. That's a better word. It impacted me because, I've grown up in Oregon. I literally, like, from preschool through college, have been in the state. I started my business in the state. I have such community ties to this state, and I'm proud to call it home. And so at the time in my company, I was working, with a team of contractors spread all over the country. And I was like, you know what? I really want to consolidate and turn these different part-time contractor roles into full-time employee positions, hire locally here in Oregon, provide medical benefits, all of these things. So my company went through this like transition, and we ended up onboarding 3 full-time employees, all locally based here in Oregon. Now, what my company did, right? Like if I were to just go to a news person and be like, here's a press release about how our company hired like new people, they don't give a crap, right? Like that has nothing to do with their reader or what they're about. But if you can tie a little, like what seems like an insignificant thing to the public that your business did to what's happening in the news, that relevance factor, that perspective factor that I was just talking about, that's when your pitch is compelling. So I remember I reached out to 2 different media outlets, and I said, hey, I read that, and I quoted the Oregonian, I hyperlinked to that article. I said, I read that, our state lost 25,000 jobs in a month. Here's why I think hiring local is a competitive advantage to business growth. And here is what we did in our business. And here was the result of that. And that pitch actually got published in a magazine, and it also got published as the front page of a Sunday edition in a local newspaper. So that's an example of how you can tie something that seems unrelated to what your business is doing to an actual timely piece of news.
That is great.
I don't know if I answered the original question, by the way. I'm so sorry. I forgot what the actual original question was.
Giving a presentation next month, and if they need to contact the local paper to see if they want to write about it.
Oh, yes. So contact them only if you can tie in like what your event is doing. How can you tie that into something of relevance in current events, or how can you attach a unique perspective to this event and why the newspaper's reader would care about it, right? You always have to think about what's in it for them, not what's in it for me.
Wonderful. How do you track the impact of publicity or other than website traffic? How can you tell if customers are walking into your store because of that publicity?
Ask them. If you don't have market research built into your checkout process or your follow-up process, I highly recommend it. For example, I sell digital programs, right? So it's different than maybe selling a physical product, but for my 12-month program, one of the last questions that every new student answers in their intake form is, what was the last thing you saw before you decided to buy? And it's like an Instagram post from Ellen, an ad. I listened to a podcast episode. A friend told me to look this up. I read an article about you. Like, we have all of these options listed out for them so that we can kind of keep tabs on what is actually generating the highest conversions for us, so we can double down and amplify on the traffic channels that are working.
Excellent. What is worth paying for if being featured is pay to play?
That's a hard question to answer because it's so specific to each circumstance, what your goals are, what your budget is, what you define as a successful outcome of that. So there's really no black or white answer there. I would say though that if you are new to the media game, pay to play is probably not what I would immediately jump to, just because when you are putting advertising dollars behind sponsored or branded content, you want to make sure it's a tested message that already converts, right? You don't want to use your dollars as the playground for testing whether or not an offer or a message lands with somebody. So free publicity is the best way to get your message out there, increase brand awareness, increase brand trust, and see what the audience at large is resonating with. And then if you have a specific story or message that is converting really well, then yeah, putting advertising dollars behind it is only going to spread that even larger, right? The way I think about advertising in any form is that advertising is adding fuel to a fire. I may have even used this example before last time, but I feel like it's worth restating for everybody who's new here. When you're using ads, whether it's social media ads, whether it's media ads, any type of ads, right? If you have a small fire going, meaning you already have something that organically is doing well or converting, if you pour money on that, it's like pouring gasoline on a fire. It booms, right? Like if you're in a forest, all of a sudden you have a forest fire. But if you don't have an already existing fire and you just pour a bunch of money, AKA gasoline, on your pile of sticks, you don't have a fire or even a bigger fire. You have wet sticks, which is actually not very helpful to you. So that's the way that I would think about advertising.
It is a great example. It really is. So thank you for sharing that. What are the best podcast platforms? Or like, how do you find the right podcast?
Oh my gosh, there's so many different ways you could go about this. The number one largest podcast player in the space that has the most market share is Apple Podcasts by far. Now, of course, if you are not an Apple user, if you're an Android user or whatever, Spotify is a pretty close second. So there's other big podcast players beyond them, but Apple's probably the first place I would look. There's a really great website called Chartable, like CHARTABLE.com, Chartable. It charts all of the top ranking podcasts in different categories and niches and sub niches. So like, for example, I'm in the business category. So my podcast, Cubicle to CEO, we're a business podcast, right? But within business, there's so many different categories. There's careers, there's entrepreneurship, there's marketing, and other different subcategories. So you can go into Chartable and you can see the top ranking. And when I say top, I don't even mean like the top 10. I mean the top, let's say 300 podcasts in your location, in your country for specific subcategories. Start listening to those podcasts and seeing like which content you might be a good guest for, like which show has content that is aligned with, what you want to present, and start, connecting with those hosts. Like, show up for their work. The number one rule of networking, right, is you become interesting by being interested, right? That's the motto I live by. And so if you want to attract the attention of people, don't make it about yourself. Show up for their work. Leave them a review, like their stuff. Show up for their lives. Make it so it's like impossible to miss who you are or what you do. Those connections will form naturally, but always show up with a heart of, how can I give back to this person first, not ask in that immediate interaction.
That is really good. Providing some value before you want to take something. I think that applies for anything in life, really. So do you have any specific advice on how to apply these ideas to someone whose business is not really in the business technology sector, but it's more of like a luxury item, a creative design, things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. You want to think about like think about the customer that you want to buy your luxury item, and think about them as a holistic person, not just as a person in this particular product category, right? What does this person in general care about? Like, what kinds of media do they already consume? What shows are they watching? What conversations do they talk about with their friends? Where do they travel? Where do they eat? What do they buy? What do they do? Think about all of these different things, and then think about, okay, the media outlets that are catering to this type of person, what kinds of stories are they telling that are of relevance to this person, or what kinds of news trends are happening that are relevant to this person who would buy this luxury item? And then how do I tie in my product or my service as a value to whatever is relevant? If you have a like specific example, I could try brainstorming with you on the spot here. I mean, I'm not necessarily a luxury goods expert, but if you have an idea, I'm happy to workshop with you.
So it is fine jewelry. And I didn't write down who wrote these questions. I've just been copying the questions. So if you want to unmute yourself, you can do that.
It was me.
I'm trying to find your face. Sorry, I don't. Okay, sorry, there's like 3 screens, so I can't see your face right now. But okay, here's an idea. I'm literally just spitballing. This is the first thing that popped into my head. I'm not saying this is the pitch you should go with, okay? This is literally just a hypothetical. So let's say you sell fine jewelry and your target demographic is women, right? Okay, we're thinking about what's happening in the news right now or what's coming up. Right now we're in April. Next month is Mother's Day. What happens during Mother's Day? A lot of people buy stuff for their moms, right? Or for their wives or their sisters or whoever daughters in their life. Gift guides is one way to go. A lot of people pitch, to get into free gift guides. That's great and can be really awesome for your business. But if you're thinking more of like story relevance, maybe your story idea is that every single year, maybe you research some stat about how much people spend, how much the average American consumer spends on this one holiday every month. Or every year, sorry. So maybe on Mother's Day, and again, I'm totally making this up. I have no idea what the stats are, but let's say like every single Mother's Day, the American economy spends $100 million on gifts for moms, right? And let's say the majority of those gifts are under $20 in value, and they're fast fashion, cheaply made items, little trinkets that like you give to mom and she's like, oh, yay. And then, it's in a drawer shoved somewhere next week. Maybe the story that you come in with is, here's why the majority of gifts bought on Mother's Day are ruining the environment and, have no long value. Or like, here's why this gift item is the best present you could give mom this Mother's Day that will last in the family for generations. Like something that's relevant to what's happening in the news that you could pitch a journalist that they might find interest in your story and be like, didn't think about it that way, right? And try to tie in specific facts and stats that you find about this to make your story not only relevant and timely, but very newsworthy, right? Like people want to read about why their consumer habits perhaps are not not the best, and what they might consider instead. And maybe you're even breaking down how, even though it's an investment in fine jewelry to purchase, let's say, a piece of jewelry that is $10,000-$20,000 over the course of several generations, if that gets passed on as a family heirloom, is it really expensive, or per wear, is it actually a better investment?
That is a great idea. So somebody asked here if when you're pitching, you should already write an article or just do a short pitch and then let them ask you questions.
Don't write an article. Not initially. Journalists are probably some of the most time-strapped people on the planet. They're constantly getting flooded with messages. So always try to keep your pitch very short, sweet, to the point. Nobody wants to read paragraphs. In fact, I know, like, I have so many friends in the media that if you send them an email that's like just a wall of text, they will immediately be like delete, like they won't even read it. So it's really important that you just pitch that like one compelling story idea, and maybe provide like 3 specific short, like super short, 1 to 2 sentence bullet points that back up why this story is compelling. So you want to keep in total your pitch to maybe like 3 to 4 paragraphs. And when I say paragraphs, I really do mean just a couple lines each, and always try to give the main points in bullet points so that a journalist can look at that and go, oh, like they've already done the research for me. That's a really great point. Let me follow back up with them. If they're interested, they will always follow back up with you, and you can expand and workshop your idea further. And they might ask you to guest write that article. That's what happened to me for one of the newspaper outlets, that story that I told you about earlier, where I pitched, why I decided to hire local and switch out my contractors for full-time employees. That one of the newspapers asked me to guest write a column, and that was like that front page spread. Another one, the magazine wrote the story about me. So it just depends on the outlet.
All right, that's great. And then let's ask one more question and get on the breakout session activity, or go over it. Are testimonials pitch worthy?
Depends. The transformation, not like, I would never just submit like, oh, here's a customer that really loved my work, and I think, they think I'm so great, so you should think I'm great too, and like send it to, the media. Cause again, they don't care, right? Like, you always have to think about like, why would their readers or their viewers or their watchers, listeners, whoever, want to know about this story. So if your client has a really interesting transformation that is again, relevant, timely, has a story, has a unique point of view, then yes, you could weave it into your pitch. Here's an example. I interviewed a woman on my podcast recently, where the majority of the conversation, we were actually talking about her client, because her client had a really interesting transformation story. This was a big time CEO of like a multi, 9-figure business, who was terrified of speaking publicly. Like, he wouldn't even get on Instagram stories and share like a 10-second clip of his face. He just hid behind the scenes. And he went from that to speaking live on stage at a Tony Robbins event to 10,000 people in a year, which is, night and day, right? So that's a client testimonial, right? But she didn't send me like his testimonial to me and have me read it. She weaved that transformation into the story, and she wanted to share a specific reason why the transformation that happened to this CEO is applicable to all of my podcast listeners, how they can show up differently, even if they have fears about public speaking or whatever it is.
Yeah, you wouldn't think that a CEO would have a fear of speaking. I know somebody was asked this question previously, but it was difficult to answer. So I'm just going to ask, I don't know if this person is here or not today. How do you get over that fear of speaking, of pitching your business, of, getting yourself out there?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I'm not a public speaking expert, so I may not be the best person to ask about this. However, I will just say about imposter syndrome in general. I actually created a little 1-minute video about this idea of imposter syndrome that, Ani, I think you actually sent out to some of the moderators for RAIN last night. Maybe if you want to include it in an email to the whole cohort later, but basically this idea of imposter syndrome, I think, imposter syndrome to me, I think is actually a strength, not a weakness. And I'll tell you why. Two things. Imposter syndrome means that you have not let your ego overpower your curiosity, first off, right? People whose ego takes first place over everything do not have imposter syndrome because they think they know everything there is to know. And the truth is, the more you become an expert at something, the more you realize that you actually don't know as much. The analogy I always give is like, it's like when you're in first grade and you're learning basic arithmetic and you learn 2 + 2 = 4 and you nail, your math and you're like, yes, I'm the best person in the world at math. And then you get into like imaginary numbers and like quantum theory and like all these crazy things in high school and college. And you're like, crap, I don't know anything about math. Like, I don't understand this at all. But the only reason you realize you know less is because you actually know more. And so as you grow and learn and your worldview expands, you're always going to realize there's so much more out there that you don't already know. But because you are open to learning and you have that curiosity, that's why you even feel imposter syndrome in the first place. So number one, that's actually a good thing. Number two is whenever imposter syndrome comes up, and this is what I shared in my little Instagram video, that's like a 1-minute reel. I talked about how every time that you hide from opportunities to show up for your ideal customer or your ideal person, whoever your business is meant to serve, right? Every time you hide from those opportunities to speak or to share a story or to share the work that you do, those people who have the problem that your product or your service or your business solves, it's not like their problem goes away magically. They're still out there searching for a solution to their problem. And when you don't show up for them, it means that they can't find you, right? Like if you literally are invisible to them, no matter how much they want to find you, they can't find you because you just don't exist in their world perspective. So they're still out there searching for a solution. And when you don't show up for them, you know who else will? Is your competitor. And when they find your competitor, they will buy into their solutions because they still have that problem. And the truth is, a lot of people out there, I'm willing to bet, do not care as much about their customer as you do. They may not actually even be as qualified to serve their customer as you do. They may not even have the best product on the market as you do. And so as long as you stay invisible, you're actually hurting the person who most needs the solution to the problem they have. And you're the only one who can offer that solution. So show up for them and realize that your imposter syndrome is an advantage. It means that you actually care about your people and you care about the results that you deliver. And that, I think, is an exceptional trait to have, not a bad thing.
Well, that is amazing. People are loving your view on imposter syndrome, and it's saying that it's a very positive reframing. Thank you so much. Great way to look at something that feels that at fault. So that's really good. So thank you so much for sharing your view with us on that. I think it's time to go over the breakout session activity.
Yeah.
And what we should focus on. And I am going to load that.
Awesome.
So I already sent this to you guys yesterday. I'm putting the link over here.
Ani, while you're loading that, can I do a quick little story of everybody? Would that be okay?
I think that will be okay. How does everybody feel about that?
If you feel comfortable turning on your cameras, I'd love to just, because there's 3 screens of you, so I have to click over.
Yeah.
I'm going to count down and just like keep waving until I bring my phone down. Okay. Cause I got to get through 3 screens of you.
Okay. Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. 1, 2, 3, wave. Amazing. Thank you guys so much. Okay.
Thank you. That was like one of those moments where you shake things off and you kind of reset and are here again.
Now tag all of our businesses in it.
Right. Instagram, that is a fault with their program. You can only tag 10 people at a time on stories, which I think is ridiculous. So if you guys would like to connect though, I'll drop all my information in the chat. I would love to connect with each of you on Instagram, on LinkedIn. And if you are looking for more free resources, our podcast, we pour our hearts into providing quality content for you every week. So if you like this session, it's basically like what our podcast is every Monday.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Okay. So let me share. Oh, so it seems like I'm not a host anymore, Nate, and it doesn't let me share the screen.
Okay, let me make you the host.
Thank you. All right. In the meantime, if you guys have any more questions, write them on the chat. We're gonna try and come back after the breakout session to, ask a few questions that were left out. So Ellen, I just pulled up the sheet.
Awesome. All right. So this is my template that I have perfected over many years of practice. That is a really great plug and play template for you to start practicing pitching yourself to podcasts. And podcasts, I think, are one of the best, easiest ways to get into the media. It's a great entry point. And like I said, even if you're on a small show, like if you're on a show with 50 listeners every week, it doesn't matter because that show will grow over time. And if those 50 people are the right people for your product or your service or your business, that's a huge impact, right? Like imagine if I put you in front of a group of 50 people live in a room and you had an hour to talk about what you do. Would you not find that a valuable opportunity? Absolutely, right? So let me go through this really quick. And explain to you the nuances behind why I have framed things the way that I have. So you can take some of those nuggets and apply it to your pitch, even if it's on a different media platform outside of podcasts. And like Ani mentioned at the beginning, if you guys could just please keep this pitch to your own private use and not share it publicly, because this is typically a paid product, I would appreciate that so much. So thank you. All right, so let's start with the subject line. The reason I formed the subject line like this is because I would say about 90% of the podcast pitches that I receive on a weekly basis, the title always says something like potential podcast guest for Cubicle to CEO, or like podcast guest suggestion, the name of the guest. That is such a boring, uncreative, blatant pitch that oftentimes, a lot of podcast hosts, if they are not actively looking for a guest in that very moment in time, they'll probably not even read your email. So instead, if you go back to that mindset shift that I told you about earlier, and you always ask yourself, what is in it for the other person? This is how you show up right off the bat, making it about them, not about you. So you put the podcast host name. Or let's say if you contacted the show already and they gave you like the manager's name and it's not the host, you would put their name, whoever you're contacting, you put their name there. Can I share whatever their podcast name is with my audience and if you don't have an audience online, that's fine. Maybe you say with my network, with my company, with my peers, whatever it is, right? That immediately is going to make them click. Why? Because of course they want you to share their podcast show with your people. That's aligning your goals with their goals, right? Which is for their podcast to reach a wider audience. So right away, you'll probably get a click open. Then you, hi, whatever the name of the person you're pitching is, then you just say your name. So if I'm filling this out, right? Like I'm just gonna use Ani as an example. Hi, Ani, Ellen here. I'm a huge fan of, the Rain Accelerator or RAINmaker podcast. And I just left your show a 5-star review on whatever. It could be Spotify, could be Apple. See attached for the screenshot. There is a very specific reason why I opened with this line. It is because this is what I call showing up with generous action. Okay. Right off the bat, you are already giving value to this person before you ever asked for a single thing in return. I have literally read hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pitches over the years. And I'm not kidding you, count on one hand how many people have actually done this when they pitched our show. It's like less than 5 people. So as you can imagine, just by doing this one microscopic action that should realistically take you no longer than 30 to 60 seconds to write them a quick review and rating and attaching that screenshot, you are already making yourself stand out among hundreds of people that they're potentially seeing on a weekly basis come through their pitch inbox. So this is huge. Show up with generous action, lead with generous action. That's what I always say. Okay, second paragraph. This second paragraph, and again, when I say paragraph, you can see that each of these paragraphs are really just like one sentence or two sentences because you got to keep your pitch short, right? You are naming a specific episode and sharing a specific insight. This proves to the podcast host that you actually did your homework and that you are not just mass copy pasting, pitching all of these different shows, the exact same pitch. It shows that you actually care about their listener and you took the time to support their work by consuming their content. So make sure you actually fill that piece out. The third paragraph, I noticed that you haven't had a guest on blah, blah, blah. This is where you, and let's say like, I'm trying to think, let's say they have had a guest on before in your specific area of expertise. That's fine. Just tweak the wording to, I noticed that you haven't had a guest on in a while, right? So you would say in a while, because again, people typically don't want back-to-back episodes of the exact same type of content. So if it's been, you know, at least 5 or more episodes since they've had someone about your specific episode, then great, pitch them here. So I noticed that you haven't had a guest on before or in a while to talk about whatever your area of expertise is. And I think your listeners would really benefit from, this is where you want to insert a specific outcome or a tangible result that their audience would gain from your proposed conversation with them. So this has to go deeper than just your topic of expertise. So, I'll use myself as an example, right? Like most of the time people refer to me as like a marketing expert or a marketing person. So if I were to pitch someone, I might say something like, I noticed you haven't had a guest on in a while to talk about social media marketing. And I think your listeners would really benefit from, and here's where I have to differentiate myself from everybody else who's here to talk about marketing. So I might say something really, really specific, like how freelancers can land $10,000 a month in client contracts with a tiny following. That's really specific, right? That's like, okay, I know that if I have Ellen on my show, my listeners will realistically walk away with a better understanding of how to land higher retainer client contracts, even if they don't have a large social media following. That's going to make me different from everybody else who shows up with the same 5 pitches. Like, I want to talk about how people can use Instagram marketing better, which is everybody on the planet. Okay. So you have to think about what is like something specific that someone could gain from this episode. Now, this next part, I think, is a piece that you might be working on in your breakout activity. Here, you're going to say, here's a sample of 3 questions that I could answer during our interview. So this is really intentional, the way that I worded and positioned this as well, because what a lot of people do when they pitch me or podcast hosts in general is they will bullet point speaking topics, which again are kind of general and they don't help me as much as when you position it in question form. So whatever speaking topic you would have, just turn it into a question, because what that's going to do is when the podcast host or the podcast manager is reading your pitch, they are literally reading that question in their head as out loud or in their head as they are reading your email. And it almost simulates the experience of what it would be like to interview you as a guest, right? Because they're literally asking the question in their head that they would be asking you if they were interviewing you. And it allows them to kind of see, oh, like this person already did all the hard work for me. They already came up with the 3 juiciest questions that I would be asking them anyways on this interview. And furthermore, if the questions are really juicy, you're going to intrigue the curiosity of the host themselves. I can't tell you how many times like I've read a pitch that positioned their pitch this way with questions where I was sitting there going, oh my goodness, like I want to know the answer to this question. I have to have this person on my show because I can't just leave this as a dead end. I have to know what they have to say about this. So that's another psychological reason why you phrase it as a question instead of as a statement. And then if you keep scrolling, the rest of this is pretty straightforward. I'd love the opportunity to serve your audience in this way. If you decide I'm a good guest fit, I plan to promote my published episode to my audience of, again, if you don't have an audience and you don't have numbers to insert in here, that's fine. Just rephrase it to something like, I plan to promote this published episode to my, my company, my peers, my whatever community you exist in person or online, that's fine. Just put it there. And then you'll notice that I end with one clear, specific question. Would you be interested in having me on your show? This is just a general pitch tip. Whenever you end an email with a question instead of a statement, you will always be more likely to get a response. A lot of people do think they end emails like, let me know if you'd be interested in blah, blah, blah. Even though you're literally saying the same thing, when you say it as a statement, people don't necessarily feel compelled to respond to you. Whereas when you ask it as a question, like, would you be interested in having me on your show? It's a simple yes or no answer, right? So people feel, for whatever reason, more rude if they just ignore a straight out blatant question than if they read a statement. So that's just a little tip you can use in any of your emails, not even pitches, like even with your colleagues or your peers. If you haven't got an answer, end an email with a clear question, not a statement. Then you sign off. Okay, this last paragraph, PS, for additional context on who I am, you can view my bio, credentials, and recent media features here. That's where you're going to hyperlink them to a press page or your about page on your website, including, and if you have past media features, this is where you would insert 2 or 3 of the biggest outlets, most recognizable outlets that you have been featured on. You'll notice throughout this entire pitch, you didn't even really talk about yourself very much until the very end, right? That is all extremely intentional. It keeps all of the focus on the host itself, their show, their listeners, and why this would be of value to their audience. And then at the end, if your pitch is well done and someone is interested in considering you as a guest, that's when they actually care enough to go research more about you, to learn more about you and your credentials and your expertise. I hope that helps.
It does help, and it helps a lot. I want to ask the audience a question. We were planning on doing our breakout session in the next, at this point, it will be like 8 minutes or so. We were just going to focus on the juicy questions and have you guys brainstorm about all of that. We could do that on our Facebook group and just like each of us do it that way. Then we do feedback on each other, and then ask more questions to Ellen in these next few minutes. What do you guys think? Thumbs up or like
let's stay here.
Clap reaction.
Yeah, let's go over here. Come on, we got her in the hot seat. Let's turn it up.
I love
All
it.
right, so it's definitely unanimous. They want you to stay.
I am honored. By the way, I just wanted to make a quick offer to all of you. I think you all are incredible. I love supporting local entrepreneurs. So I want to actually give you guys the opportunity, if you want a safe space and a safe container to practice pitching yourself. Like if you're really nervous about this and you want, your pitch to be read by kind eyes, you are more than welcome to utilize that exact pitch that I just gave you. Practice plugging in your information and pitch it to us, to our show, Cubicle to CEO. And I'll give you my podcast manager's contact information here in the chat. So just go to the chat. Her name is Sabrina. So that's the name you're going to want to put in the subject line, not my name. And her email is podcast@ellenyin.com. Now, of course, I cannot unfortunately guarantee that every single one of you will end up on my show. But she does her best to always at least respond and let you know, we have your information on file. But it's just such a great way to literally get over that fear of sending out that very first pitch, to get it into someone's inbox. And so go ahead and please use this as practice if you would like.
That is a wonderful offer. I think this is going to help people. Guys, let us know when you get featured. Please, we do, these are things that we really, well, first we have to celebrate with you. But these are success stories, right? And we always want to hear about them. All right, so we have Jenny here with a question. Feel free to unmute yourself, Jenny.
Hello. Yeah, Ellen, thank you so much. This is awesome information. I almost can't type fast enough to capture all this awesome information you gave us.
Thank you.
I actually am a former journalist. I majored in journalism. Yeah, and I did freelancing for quite a few years, but even with not my knowledge of journalists, I don't really know how to pitch to journalists. So that was really helpful. And yeah, I think linking into current events is a great idea. I just want to run my question by you, my juicy question, see if
Yes.
it's juicy enough.
Let's do it.
So, okay. So how can a pink eraser help you become better at managing your time?
Ooh, that's a really juicy question. I'm like, tell me more. Okay, the only small tweak I might make to this is number one in pitch, never assume that whoever you're pitching understands your industry lingo or jargon. I know that a pink eraser is not industry lingo, right? I'm assuming you're talking about the classic like pop on pink eraser, right? But I think it's a great point just to make, never assume that someone knows what you're to. So if you need to put in a little bit of context there, just to make sure that they're clear on what you're saying, that would be the only tweak I would make, but that's a great question.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah.
Excellent. Anybody else? We did ask all of the questions that you guys had on the chat before we went. Oh, look, there's one here that I hadn't seen. Would podcasts be less appropriate for people who sell physical objects? It seems like visual would work better for that.
Not necessarily, because if you have a really interesting story as to how your product was formed, or like a customer whose life has been really impacted by your product. So for example, one of my very first marketing clients, she was the founder of Cauliflower Foods. They basically pioneered the entire cauliflower pizza market, like that whole craze that blew up, and now cauliflower is in everything, right? But she had so many amazing stories. Like one of the customers, her child, had cancer, and couldn't eat like almost any like normal carbs, bread, rice, pasta, pizza. And so he always felt really left out. Like this, I'm talking about like a 9-11-year-old kid, really sad, like birthday parties with his classmates. He was always like the odd one out, like couldn't eat with the rest of the kids, all that stuff. And his mom wrote the most like tear-jerking letter about how these crusts changed her boy's life, because he finally, like, he could bring his own pizza to his friend's house for their birthdays, and he was able to eat with them and just be a kid and not think about being different. That kind of story is so interesting and compelling to the media. And it doesn't require you to show the pizza crust. It doesn't require you to list like, oh, our pizzas have this nutrition information, right? Like, because the listener, they just want to know, they want that emotional connection to your product. So that's an example.
Wonderful. Can you give an example or tell us a little bit more about what is a juicy question versus a boring one?
Yeah. First, I would say, I don't know if there is such a thing as a boring question, because that's relative to who is receiving the question, right? So you can always find someone who's interested in any variety of questions. But I think it's more so like, would this question be helpful to the listener of this show? Like, would this question be interesting to them and different than maybe, the other content that has been either featured on the show or other content that is readily available? So for example, the person who just said, like, how does a pink eraser, help you do this? Like, that's really interesting, because we normally don't associate a common item like an eraser to self-betterment, right? Or self-development. And so it kind of makes you pause. It's like a pattern interrupt, and it makes you go, huh, like, what does that mean? Like, I need to know more about this. So don't discount something just because it's boring to you, because as the expert, when you're so close to the subject matter, sometimes things that are insane to other people are boring to you, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't have value to the listener. So that's the way I would think about it. Like, does this question give value to the listener?
Wonderful. Joe, you have a question.
There we go. Yeah, I have a question and I have a success story to just really talk about. We talked about people using podcasts as a way of getting themselves over the hump, or exposing themselves on a broader market.
Yeah.
I shared a podcast with both Annie and Aska about 2 weeks ago. I used to be in the environmental industry, and we were in the process of getting a grant from the state to create something called the Rhode Island Environmental Workforce Initiative. I went onto a podcast called Renewable Now. and basically pitched not only the company I worked for at the time, but the reasons why we went ahead and thought that this was a great idea. From that, somebody in the the Rhode Island DEP heard this, sent this back to the governor's office. We wound up being the finalist and won the grant.
Oh my goodness. I love that story. And Joe, can I just say, I think your point proves that you never, and I truly mean you never know who is silently listening or watching your content. And sometimes the biggest decision makers in an industry are not public figures. They are not people that you would easily recognize their name or faces. So it is important to not discount a platform as viable or valuable as a way to get your message out there just because it is small or just because it is lesser known. Joe, to your point there, I had a friend who told me that there's this one podcast out there that literally has 20 listeners, but it's a show. It's such a niche show. It's literally about I think it's like the head of like heart surgery across all the major hospital networks in America. And so like such a niche listener, right? Like who would care about that content, but these 20 listeners are literally the top decision makers at their hospitals for their departments. And so like, if you're going to get in front of 20 of the most important people that you want to collect in a room for your specific thing, if you sell like like a pacemaker or some like heart related product, right? These are the people you want to hear your message. And so I think that's a great story.
One more quick point. Two of my favorite words in the English language are centric and synergy. And when thinking about when you're going to match up with one of these podcasts, take those two words and put them at the top of your list of how you're going to match up and so on, because your audience is going to be more apt to listen to what it is and maybe again, have that synergy at the end to be able to make a contact and growth in your business.
I love that. That's so good.
All right, beautiful. I know you have to leave here quite soon and we're going to talk about other things, you guys, but we can share all of that later on. One question is, if you are pre-launch, if you haven't launched your business yet, should you be thinking about this?
Oh, heck yes. Yeah. That I think it's a great time actually to start seeding that brand awareness to get your product story out there. My friend Gloria Chu, she runs a podcast called Small Business PR, just a plug for her. She literally has so many pre-launch founders that have had great success with the media that I think might be inspiring for any of you to listen to. So that's another resource you can add to your free rotation if you want.
Wonderful. And any tweaks or things that you can recommend for artists or creators with this template? For example, being an author with a wonderful book for young artists. So
I really feel like that template could be tweaked to any profession, it's more about like who's a listener that you're reaching, right? Like if you're in a podcast that the primary demographic is other authors, the questions that you're going to pitch and the way you present your information is going to look different than if you're on a podcast where the majority of the listeners are parents of young artists, right? Different demographic, different interest topics. So I would that's why it's so important to do your research, like listen to the show that you're pitching, see how they structure their content, see what kind of guests they've had on the past, what kind of questions they ask. That's going to give you a better understanding of how to create a really compelling pitch.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We are right on the clock. If you guys want to stay here for a little bit, that's great. If not, that's okay. We know we respect your time. I think we should all unmute ourselves and give a big shout out to Ellen for coming over today.
Brilliant.
Hello, Ellen.
Thank you
so much,
Ellen.
Thank you.
Being ready.
Oh my goodness. I wish I could hear all of you.
Thank you. I learned so much. Thank you.
Awesome.
Glad to hear that. Please continue to connect with me, outside of this container. Ani and the team do such an incredible job of just gathering the best humans here. So thank you for your time. And I'm so grateful for this opportunity to speak to you all, but please connect with me on Instagram, connect with me on LinkedIn, subscribe to Cubicle to CEO. We'd love to have you be part of our ongoing community.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks. Thank you
Bye,
for sharing.
Thank you, Ellen.
So much.
Bye.
Thank you, Ellen and Rain team. Nicely done again.
And Annie,
All
thank
right.
you for all you do. You're
Of
amazing.
Thanks,
course.
Ellen. I'll be in touch.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for connecting today. We were going to share with you who the keynote speaker is for graduation. Ta-da-da. We can definitely do that in other ways at another time. It did seem like our time was better used asking questions and getting answers. Ellen does have so much knowledge, and you know, she is a really good speaker. So I mean, I thought it's okay to ask her about this because even if she's not a public speaking expert, she's very good at that. So we are going to be raffling. So Anna, it's going to be seeing all of your attendance who was connected over here. And then we're going to do a random generator. And we can either, Anna, you let me know when you would like to do this. It does take a little bit of time for us to be able to process all of your attendance. But if you were here, you are on the list. And we're either going to send an email or announce it at the beginning of the next class. On the next session, we're going to have essentially very good actionable tips on how to kickstart your online presence before you start reaching out, before you start you know, like promoting and all of those things. Let's develop a really good base so that when people go in, they can actually find you, see what you're about, see what your business is about, and maybe even book some time with you. Robert, would you like to add anything?
I don't actually have anything to add except Ellen, just spectacular work. You know, I actually take speaking pretty seriously, and you are truly impressive. Your expertise is clear, it's present, really across the board, and we are honored to have had you here today.
Awesome. All right, you guys. Well, I'm going to hang out here for a little bit. If you have any questions that you would like answered, any comments, feel free to unmute yourself. I'm going to stop the recording now.